This is Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details. Here are your hosts, Joe, Matt, and Chris.
Who won NFL free agency? That is what we're here to tell you today at Between the Uprights. Even though there's still a bunch of notable names on the board in free agency, we are giving you our winners from that early period that saw some teams and players get huge money deals. We saw some teams spend a lot of money. We saw some players get a lot of money. And we are here to tell you who are the winners from that. And I don't know about Chris, but I'm got my teacher hat on. I put my teacher hat on, and I'm going to give a few grades here, too, for some of these teams as well. So stay tuned for that. But, Chris, I'm going to kick it to you first. Who won the offseason? Which team do you got?
Ooh, okay. So there's a mix. I feel like of some teams that I think did a lot of great things. So far, we can't even say the free agency's over. It's just like so far the moves that they made. But I think you can't really go into this conversation without perfectly mentioning to me, and not just because I'm a Patriots fan, but just because I think the Patriots did a lot. I don't think a lot of their moves, I'm not going to say a lot of their moves. There were some of their moves that a lot of people I don't think fully appreciated. Everybody's kind of stuck on they need a left tackle, they need a wide receiver. Like they're kind of just stuck on that. So they're not really, I feel like, kind of embodying what has actually taken place this year versus what they did last year. There's such a big difference. So the biggest thing is they have completely nullified the issue that they had, I feel like anyway, with their defensive line. And if we saw anything in the Super Bowl, it was the front O-line versus the front D-line. That was the biggest thing that came out of the Super Bowl, and I think what a lot of teams are kind of focusing on right now. So if you look at that and you look at what the Patriots did coming into free agency, it was the tampering period, right? Like, they shouldn't even call it tampering period, just like it starts now.
It's so dumb. I don't know why they call it. It doesn't make any sense.
That makes zero sense. Like, if you can tamper, then just say that's when free agency opens. Like, I don't understand 100%. The need. Makes zero sense. But I think they went into the tampering period, and for one, I feel like they definitely had a plan. Like, if anybody paid attention to what they were talking about in their different press conferences, they made a point of, like, they had the ability to pivot if they needed to, make changes if they needed to. Like, obviously they had a board of people that they wanted, but they weren't just going to be solely focused on that person. And then kind of like last year, you didn't get that person, so now what do? They have a lineup of like A, B, C, D, all the way down. And I feel like that really showed, and it's continued to show as free agency has continued. But the biggest thing, obviously, is they won the D-line 100%. Like, I feel like they could really go into the draft with their D-line pretty much solidified. And we know it's a very good draft class when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. So they don't necessarily, based off the moves that they made, they don't necessarily have to make a lot of big-time moves at the beginning of the draft to pay attention to the D-line. Because really, with the moves that they've made thus far with this free agency and the money that they've moved, I don't feel like they've done it without cause. Like, you see some that, like, they're desperate, so they have a ton of money, so they just spend a ton of money on whoever's willing to take it. I don't feel like they did that. I feel like they got the right players for a decent amount of money. If you had to overpay someone, which we all know who we overpaid coming out of the Eagles, okay? But I don't feel like they overpaid him much, but they got the best guy in free agency. When's the last time we've seen that actually happen with the Patriots, to them actually to come bring somebody into the Patriots? It's been really hard, I feel like, to bring big-time players in free agency to come to New England and play for New England. So I think that by itself won the draft for me. Or not the draft, the free agency for me, for sure. But if you look at it, I also think a sneaky move is the right tackle, which if anybody actually listened to his press conference, like, you can't leave that press conference and not be impressed by this man all the way around. Like, if you're looking for a culture setter, if you're looking for somebody who's going to come in and be a leader, especially when it comes to the offensive line, who's going to be able to teach those guys, help your coach make the best out of what you have, you got the best one. And you can't say that there hasn't been any issues with the biggest thing is their offensive line. And they brought in a right tackle that shores up that side. There's no more questions coming into the training camp who's going to be at right tackle. And we saw this the entire last season of them just pulling people in, putting people here, putting people there. Like, there was no even all the way down to the last game, there was no surefire plan of who was actually taking over that spot. We saw plenty of different players try to move it, and it did not work. I think what they did is a smart move. You go and you get a vet, I would think a well-respected one, who clearly has a want to be there and has the ability to bring the best out of your players. And I think that's what you want, especially as the head coach. We know what Vrabel's looking for, and I think he gives him the best shot. So I think he did a great. I don't think that was looked at as a very high pick as far as free agency. It wasn't a sexy one, but I feel like it was absolutely needed, and it was a great one that I think a lot of people are undermining, in my opinion. Same thing with the Matt Collins thing. Like, everybody's going off about the wide receiver thing. No, he's not going to be a wide receiver one. We get that, but what he does bring is he brings tenacity. He brings a hardcore want to actually be on the field. A good dude, a dude that is clearly very comfortable with who he is as a person. There is no mistaking who he is, what he's into, where his mindset is. Like, there's no wondering about that. So you bring him into a very young wide receiver room who have the ability to get the best out of those guys. Teach those guys how to be a professional. That's the biggest thing we saw last year. People crybabying about not getting balls and then dropping them consistently. Or, Javon Baker, like, not getting any options at all to even be on the field. You had your wide receiver that you brought in last year out of the draft, who Polk just lost his step. In my mind, he lost any hope that he was any good, and I feel like that came from his coaching staff. And you didn't have a lot outside of Kendrick Bourne, to be honest. You didn't have a lot there. The people that lift you up and say, "Hey, it's okay. Like, you're gonna be all right. Your first year's gonna be rough. It's okay." You didn't have that. So you bring in a Matt Collins who has that ability. So for me, I think based off the moves that they made, I don't think they overspent for anybody. They still have quite a bit of cap space left, so I don't think they really overspent in a bad way at all in any degree. And I think a lot of the moves they made, even the one we were just talking about earlier today, the moves that they were making are good. Like, you just got a legit center. Maybe he's not, a primary number one center, but he's still a very good one, and one that you can put on your starting lineup, and it clears that spot, at least for now. And it teaches your younger guys how to be a professional and how to play that spot. Mostly I would think they're talking about Cole Strange in my mind as who they're probably looking to become the center. So I think with all that said, I think that the Patriots thus far has definitely been a winner in my mind when it came to free agency, and much better than what they did last year, for sure.
Automatic, Chris. I completely agree with you. I mean, like you mentioned, the moves on the offensive line, especially for those vets, is super, super important, because we saw last year with the Patriots offensive line, arguably the worst offensive line in football last year, adding a couple of vets into that room, even if they're, like you said, Chris, even if they're not like, Trent Williams and freaking Orlando Pace, like, it's like, you don't have to add the best guys into that room at this point. You just got to add some vets with some experience that are going to come in and produce at a decent level, because, we saw what Drake May is capable of, even with a bad offensive line last year. So if you give him even a solid one, again, that's going to be a big plus. And then, like you mentioned, the defensive moves, again, we knew Vrabel was already going to make the defense better, even with, no additions on defense, which inevitably there was going to be some, but we knew he was going to make the defense better. And now with Milton Williams, hopefully Christian Barmore is going to be back in that mix in the defensive line as well. Then you got a deadly cornerback duo of Carlton Davis and, Christian Gonzalez back there, Spillane in the linebacker core. He's going to be another big addition, So again, this free agency period's kind of freed up the draft for the Patriots to really focus on that offense and really try to focus on things that are going to help Drake May develop and help Drake May become the best possible version of himself. And two, it's opened up that the draft as well to, if you do want to trade a second round or third round pick for a receiver, like me and you are kind of on board for. I know Joe's not the most on board for that plan, but me and you are kind of on board for that plan, where if it's like, hey, you want to go get you mentioned Michael Pittman. I talked about Chris Olave as far as receivers that they want to go get. Those are really good options if you want to trade a third round pick for one of those guys and get an established, maybe not a high level number one receiver, but a really solid, lower level number one receiver and high level number two receiver in there for your group would be a huge addition to that New England Patriots team. So I like the moves that they made as well, because again, it frees them up to do a bunch of different things for draft wise. So whether they want to trade down a little bit and get a tackle, or they want to get a Travis Hunter in there, whatever they want to do, they've got options.
They have it's so crazy to hear that. Maybe it's more fun to talk about because we're both Patriots fans, so it's so much fun to actually be able to have this conversation, because we haven't been able to have a lot of positive conversations about them. Right. But if you look into it, like, if they really go into the draft and their biggest needs essentially are left tackle and wide receiver, you're completely open, because you can't tell me there's no way in which they can get both, quite honestly, either in the first round or the first and second round, which I really see them. They could trade down and take Tech McMillan at maybe 9, 10 in that range, and then use those extra picks to get back up into the first round, maybe the end of the first round in like the 20s, and get your left tackle, and you're done. The rest of your draft is just, hey, we'll take the best player or a guy who fits our scheme and we can bring up. Done. Like, for sure. Crazy ability based on what they've done with the free agency.
They've got options too. You could go. I mean, you could just go best available at 4. You could go. Like I said, Travis Hunter's there. You can improve both sides of the ball. In theory, there. Freaking Abdul Carter might be there. Make your defensive line just dominant. And then 2, there's some tackle depth. There's some offensive line depth later on in the draft as well. There's a few tackles that I really like in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. Ariante Ersley out of Minnesota. He's someone that I really like. I think he could be a cornerstone left tackle. He's probably someone we're going to talk about here in future draft videos. I like him a lot as far as offensive line goes. But yeah, I like the Patriots setup a lot right now. I think they're in a really, really good position. But I'm going to give you a few teams, Chris, that I also really like their offseason. And I didn't want to go Patriots just because it was like I knew you were going to go.
I know it's easy, but I couldn't help it, man.
I mean, they did great. It's hard to knock them, but I wanted to go other teams that I like besides the Pats. And the first one I'm going to go with was the Carolina Panthers. I really like what the Panthers did this offseason. They brought in a bunch of defense, 3 D linemen, Patrick Jones, Bobby Brown, and Tershawn Wharton. Then they made a big money deal. They signed Trayvon Merrick in free agency, one of the best safeties on the market, to a 3-year deal. And I think that's really going to help shore up a defense that was literally the worst defense ever last year, Chris. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I'll say it again, literally the worst defense in the history of the NFL. 534 points allowed in 2024 for the Carolina Panthers. That's the most of all time. And their run defense that allowed 179.8 yards per game last year was the almost 40 yards more per game than the second worst last year, and also was the worst run defense in the NFL since our 1981 New England Patriots, Chris, who allowed 184 yards per game. So they're the worst run defense last year in 43 years. That's how bad they were defensively last year. And granted, they were a little bit banged up. They were seventh most points missed due to injury, aka like the most negatively affected team due to injury. 7th most negatively affected team due to injury last year, per Sports Info Solutions. Derek Brown got hurt last year. Their linebacker duo got hurt last year. There was a lot of big injuries last year. Derek Brown's obviously their best player on defense for the Panthers, but again, even if they were healthy, right, that defense still wasn't going to be great. And their safeties were super weak last year as well. So getting Merrick helps there a lot. But too, for the Panthers, you won 5 games last year, even with literally the worst defense ever, So, and now you have a Bryce Young coming into year 3, who's going to be even more confident. I think if the Panthers have a big draft, we could be talking about potentially a playoff team next year in Carolina, because they've got some really nice building blocks in Carolina as far as next year goes. So for the Panthers, I'm giving the Panthers a B+ from me in free agency. I thought they did a really nice job. I think they still need some more weapons, but a really nice job from the Panthers in free agency. I also want to talk about the Vikings. The Vikings, I thought, were a big winner in free agency, despite how we've previously talked about the Vikings on this show. I really actually enjoyed what the Vikings did in free agency. Although they lost Sam Darnold, which was kind of to be expected, they kind of relocated the funds that they were going to use to sign Darnold, and they made some really nice moves. They fortified the offensive line. Will Fries, I should say, at guard. Ryan Kelly at center from the Colts. Both of those guys from the Colts. Will Fries for 5 years, $87 million. Get paid, Will Fries. Oh my gosh. And then Ryan Kelly, 2 years, $18 million. Both of which PFF graded among the league's best last year. Both were top 11 at their position last year per PFF. So fortifying that interior of the line is going to be really, really nice, especially because you have good tackles in Christian Darrisaw, and O'Neal as well is really good at right tackle. And then they re-signed Aaron Jones in their running back room and traded for Jordan Mason as well. So now you have a really solid running back room combined with what we know what the receiver room is in Minnesota and the tight end room as well. And now you're setting up your young quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, for a really solid first year as a starter in Minnesota. Plus, they also added to their D-line with 2 former Pro Bowlers and Jonathan Allen from the Commanders and Javon Hargrave coming from the 49ers as well. And re-signing Byron Murphy and adding Isaiah Rodgers to that secondary. I think they still need a little more secondary help, and losing Cam Bynum's going to hurt them. But I think it was an awesome free agency for Minnesota. I'm giving Minnesota A- for the Minnesota Vikings in free agency. Now, another team that I thought had a good free agency haul, Chris, the Washington Commanders. I thought they had a solid free agency, but it wasn't necessarily the free agents that the Commanders got. It was their trades. The big one was getting one of the best blindside pass protectors in the NFL for their young quarterback. Getting Laramie Tunsil for an offensive line that had some weaknesses last year is huge for next year, obviously, for the Commanders' success and for the longevity of their young quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I think getting someone like Laramie Tunsil to protect his blind side is going to be very, very big for the Washington Commanders. But if Kingsbury, and 2, Another one that I like, I say I like it, but it's not like my favorite move of that they had. The Deebo Samuel trade, obviously they went and got Deebo Samuel. I'm not a huge fan of Deebo Samuel as a player, but if Cliff Kingsbury can find some creative ways to get him involved, I think that's going to be a solid number 2 option behind Scary Terry for the Washington offense that desperately needed a nice number 2 option last year. And then they also brought in Javon Kinlaw for their defensive line as well. The team still has some weaknesses they need to address in the draft, secondary and interior offensive line, but and they had definitely some weaknesses there last year. And they had 3 pretty big losses as well, losing Jonathan Allen, like I just mentioned, to the Vikings, Jeremy Chin, and De'Ami Brown. But a really good free agency for Washington nonetheless, setting Jaden Daniels up for a really big sophomore season in 2025. I'm going to give the Commanders a B+ for their free agency. So those are a few of the ones that I got. Chris, I know you got one more, so I'm going to kick it to you.
I do.
Chris, who do you got as another team that you think did really well in free agency?
Honestly, I think you brought up a couple that I didn't even think about, to be honest. I know the Commanders had a good one. Again, I don't think it's similar to the Patriots. I don't think it was one of those where it was like super flashy. The Deebo Samuel, I think, is a sneaky good pick. A lot of people are already kind of writing him off, but they definitely needed a wide receiver too. And look who their offensive coach is, right? Like that's your offensive guy. Yeah, he's going to find ways to use him 100%. And that was probably his biggest issue, I feel like, anyway, with the 49ers. I think they lost touch of how to use him. And it just didn't go well. But I think one that shouldn't be surprising, I don't think, to anybody. I know you've been a big fan of the Bears moves that they've made thus far. So the Bears have to be on they have to be on a winner's side. And the biggest reason is because their new head coach has clearly made a message that his biggest purpose for this offseason was getting his man protected. That man had 68 sacks last year. Top of the league in sacks. So if you want to go in, especially, I think I'm more so impressed with the fact that he is and I think we've talked about this on previous shows. He's a new head coach, right? He's only been an OC. He's a new head coach. He's a first-time head coach. He's going into the Bears, who isn't necessarily known to have a great franchise to begin with. They don't normally have a great way of elevating their new quarterbacks. That's why they keep going through them every couple years. We saw that with the one that just left, right? That moved to the Jets. So, and Justin Fields, I don't know why I lost his name. And I feel like that was a big miss, to be honest. But I think his moves that he's already taken thus far is he has made it very clear for the people that he went out with. I mean, going from between trades and free agency, his first goal, and he absolutely nailed it, was to clear up that O-line, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, come on. You just took this dude from the Kansas City Chiefs, right, who just won basically several Super Bowls with them. He got 7 Super Bowls with the Patriots, and now that's who you're bringing in as your guard. Hell yeah. Like, you're already shored up just from that. And then on top of that, you make a billion other different moves. So I think that has to be the reason why they win it, because he was already going to be looked at. Quite honestly, I wasn't completely on the bandwagon as far as like how he was going to be able to operate as a brand new head coach, like how he was going to handle his first offseason. Quite honestly, I think he has blown it out of the water. He's made it very, very clear that he wants Caleb Williams to be completely taken care of, and wants to make sure you're giving him, because it's not like they don't have weapons. Their offense was already set up. It's just their O-line was horrendous. So if you can get this man not to be pressured so much to where he's getting sacked every time he steps back, that changes up a lot of your options. So I will go in the same suit that you went to with the Panthers and say that I do believe that there's a really good chance that they end up going to the playoffs this year. I would put 99% of a chance that even if they may just win their division, to be honest. Man. That's a very good, the way he set them up, because it's not like their defense was already horrible. It wasn't. Their defense was really good. It's just their offensive line was always a question mark, and he has clearly already kind of ensured that that's already been taken care of. That was his biggest need. Took care of it. So he's by far the winner, I feel like, in the free agency time period. I'm sure he's going to do more going into the draft.
Yeah, Chris, we were on the same page with this one. This is my main winner in free agency, was the Chicago Bears. Yeah. And you talked about a lot of the points that I wanted to bring up, but I mean, listen, in one free agency, they basically went from having one of the worst interior offensive lines in the NFL in 2024 to potentially one of the best interior offensive lines in 2025. So they added Jonah Jackson, who's 28, was top 40 out of 135 graded guards per PFF last year, even though he missed some time as well last year. And he's already played with new head coach Ben Johnson in Detroit. He played with Detroit for 2022 and 2023, so he knows exactly what Ben Johnson's all about. He knows exactly what that offense is all about. And they gave up just a 6th-round pick this year to get Jonah Jackson. So again, that's a big win in and of itself for the Chicago Bears. Then, like you mentioned, Chris, you go get a potentially future Hall of Fame guard in Joe Thuney, a 3-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, and you want to add some Super Bowl and playoff experience to your team, Chris. How about a 4-time Super Bowl champ in Joe Thuney getting added to your offensive line? And they gave up just a 4th-round pick next year for him. I mean, that's just a giant win for the Chicago Bears. And then obviously they go get 26-year-old center Drew Dahlman in free agency. Anybody who is an Atlanta Falcons fan knows about Drew Dahlman, 26 years old. Like I mentioned, he was the 4th best center in football last year per PFF. 3 years, $42 million. He's rarely penalized, doesn't allow many pressures, and is great in the run game as well, which is huge for a Bears offensive line that was highly penalized, allowed the most sacks in the NFL, 68 sacks, like you mentioned, Chris, and was also the 9th worst rushing offense in the league last year. So you get 3 vets to solidify that offensive line with a really good right tackle already in Darnell Wright and another solid left tackle in Braxton Jones. Now you have maybe one of the best offensive lines in the NFL next year, and going from one of the worst, and now you're setting up your young quarterback for a tremendous sophomore season. And then to go along with that, they also solidified the defensive line as well with Deo Digbo and Grady Jarrett last year, or coming up for this season as well for that defensive line. Last year, the defensive line was 6th worst, the total defense in total yards per game, and 6th worst in rush yards per game, and 6th worst in rush yards per carry, and was only 20th in the NFL in sacks last year. So adding a guy like Jarrett and a guy like Odigbo is going to be really, really big, because they were weak in the trenches in 2024 on both sides of the ball, and now they solidified them here for 2025. And like I just mentioned with some of those with the Patriots before, it's going to allow them flexibility in the draft where they don't have a ton of spots where they like need to get somebody now. It's not like, hey, we have to get somebody in the first round here, and they're allowed to kind of just go best available. So if they get to the 10th overall pick and Ashton Genty sitting there at running back, like, hey, we can get Ashton Genty, bring him in behind this offensive line that we just solidified with Caleb Williams, with Romo Dunze, with DJ Moore, and we can go out and score 30 points a game and beat just about anybody in the NFL. So I gave the Bears an A+ for free agency. I gave them 100%, no doubt, an A+ for free agency, because the Chicago Bears, you mentioned it, Chris, that's a dangerous, dangerous team. They might be in the best division in football next year, but again, I'm not going to be shocked if the Chicago Bears win the NFC North next year, because they are that good as far as this team is set up for next year.
This has been Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details.